If you look at the online pages and also the pages of magazines, you see the options for high-end touring 4x4 vehicles seems to be unlimited. The only thing stopping you from building the car of your dreams is your budget. There's so many different things you can do now. Of course, you've got your Land Cruisers, which is traditionally what people love, but do you buy a 79, a 78, the new 300, or try and even get an old 200 series? Do you want to stretch it? Do you want to put a canopy on it, or just keep it as a wagon? And then, of course, there's all the new American pickups that are becoming so popular in Australia right now. We thought we'd come out here with three of the best vehicles we've seen in the country, some of the most popular vehicles that are around, and see which ones are the best for towing, driving on bush tracks, on-road, off-road, and tell you what we reckon is the best Australian outback touring vehicle. The three vehicles we've got here all come from Rambler vehicles in Queensland. They've been manufactured, built up to create perfect touring vehicles. But what have we got? We've got a 300 series Land Cruiser. It's what they call their long wheelbase version with a midi canopy on the back of it. Here we've got the Chevy Silverado Trail Boss. It's got GCM and GVM upgrades to make it a good touring vehicle, plus all the usual jacked up suspension, big wheels and tyres. And over the other side there, you've got a 79 series. It's got a 300mm extension in it, full canopy, all the touring accessories on board. Really excited to see how they perform in these conditions out here in the Queensland bush. Let's get out there and have a play. Certainly one of the more popular vehicles for this type of high-end build is the Land Cruiser 70 series. Starts out as a really basic vehicle, and yeah, the sky's the limit now on what accessories you want to do with it. And this one here from Rambler, it's got the works. Starting out underneath, it's got a superior engineering coil spring conversion at the back. It's got superior engineering suspension under the front. There's a 6-speed automatic transmission conversion from Wholesale Automatics, tuned V8 engine with PWR intercooler. Then of course you've got the big canopy on the back, full length one on this with all the gear in there, the fridge, the 12-volt system, all the gear you want for touring. There's also a 300mm chassis extension as well, just to give it that extra wheelbase, make it more stable on the road. Now some would say an automatic 70 series is almost the perfect touring vehicle. And I've got to say, I really love driving this truck. Inside it's been dollied up as well with the big screen head unit. It's got leather trim seats with extra side bolsters and a bit of extra thigh support, and the Rambler logos on there. Just that little bits of luxury that the 70 series is certainly lacking in standard form. Now, you might think, you know, rear coil conversions, automatic transmission jobs, they're all going to be costly items, and you'd be totally right about that. This car in particular has had more than twice its purchase price spent on it since it got into Rambler. Think about that for a minute. Double cab 79s don't come cheap, so double that and add it on, and you got an idea of what this thing costs. You're not getting any change from $250,000 on this truck, and I've got to say, if I had that money to spend, I'd be totally in this thing. It is a beautiful truck to drive. Of course, there's all your regular off-road accessories, TJM, bull bar, side steps, light force lights, GME radio, all the good gear for touring. This is a vehicle you can take anywhere. Out of the three trucks here, this is probably going to be the more off-roadable vehicle. 35-inch tyres, good suspension. Yeah, the 79 is certainly really made for this sort of stuff, and so far among these three vehicles, this is probably my favourite of them. It's just that big old tough truck feel, and gets along and does everything right without any fuss or fanfare. But no, let's get in the other ones and see how they compare. I've got to admit that when Chris from Rambler told us about the 3 vehicles we were going to have out here this week, this is the one that really had me interested. The Land Cruiser 300 series, but this is not just any 300 series wagon, no. It's been chopped and stretched and turned into a double cab ute. This one in particular, once again, out to ASG, the back of the wagon cut off, turned into a double cab, 650mm chassis extension, tray on the back with what they call the midi canopy, which is almost like a half-length canopy, and you've got half a little ute tub up there behind the spare wheels. Everyone sort of asks what the V6 engine's like. Well, this one's got a bigger exhaust system on it. It's been copped a tune as well, so it gets along real nice. And I've got to say, for a V6 engine, it's got a really nice note to it when you put your foot down. Of course, once again, all the 2JM protection gear, bull bar, side steps. This car's got the TJM XJS suspension, front and rear. Also got some airbags under the back for when you're towing. You know, we've seen plenty of 200 series conversions along this style over the years, and to see it adapted to the 300 and it works really well, it's, you know, a very positive thing. Driving it around here on the property, up the steep hills and so forth, it's a lot more refined than either of the other 2 cars, as you'd expect really. But the surprising part is that it does everything so much easier as well. The Toyota traction control system is amazing. This car's got no lockers in it, it's a base model. Using the traction control to get up some of the gnarlier bits through here, did it easily, and easier than the other 2 vehicles. That includes the 79 series with its lockers and all the other bits and pieces. So once again, a really good touring vehicle. Perfectly set up for towing, GVM upgrade, close to 4,500 on this, probably just a touch under, just so you don't need to tip over to the heavy license. You got all the luxury features and comforts of the 300 in here, plenty of back seat room, very spacious and, you know, well appointed interior, even though it's a GX model. Chris has given the seats the Rambler treatment as he does on all the cars, so these would have been cloth originally in a GX, but they're now full leather with the side bolsters and extra thigh padding there. Little Rambler logos along there as well. Like the 79, you won't get any change from $250,000 on this. In fact, you're looking at closer to 270,000. The way this thing is, and of course there's a pretty hefty price tag to buy a 300 series. I don't know how I'd be about spending all that money on a brand new car and then taking the sawzall to the back of it and cutting the back off it. But no, the finished product is first class. No rattles or squeaks in it after all that work that's been done on it. Drives beautifully, as you expect of a 300 series, and certainly gets plenty of looks once we were driving through town there earlier. Certainly be the talk of the caravan park when you pull in there with your rig. Let's try something completely different next, the big petrol V8 Chevy. The abundance of full-size American pickups in Australia has certainly put them on the radar of many people looking for a touring four-wheel drive. And here we're in the Chevy Silverado 1500 Trail Boss with the 6.2 litre petrol V8 engine, 10-speed auto, good four-wheel drive system with an auto rear locker, and that 4,500 kilogram towing capacity. That's certainly something that gets people excited when you've got a big van or horse float, all those sort of things. Of course, this car's had the full Rambler treatment. It's got rough country remote res shock absorbers, Fab Force front bumper, the Light Force lights, another swag them across the top of the roof lights, and then you got that V8 bellow. It is a sweet engine. Big exhaust system on this, sounds really good. No need for a chassis extension on these big full-size pickups, so they come nice and big with heaps of rear leg room, plenty of room out the back for a nice big canopy, and this has got the full-size one, upright fridge, full 12-volt system, all the gear in the back there. The difference between the Chevy and the two Toyotas, and basically any other of the popular four-wheel drives in Australia, is interior space. If you're looking for a vehicle to tow, like I say, the big horse float or your ski boat, something like that, over long distances with the family, these things are perfect. What the 1500 Chevs genuinely lack is payload capacity. But part of this Rambler conversion is a GVM upgrade. And like the 300 series, this is rated at 44.99 kilos, so just under that 4500 limit. Retains that 4500 kilo towing capacity. You know, perfect for towing your big vans, big rigs, all over the countryside. Goes really well off the off-road stuff here. We were going up the steep tracks with it yesterday. It's a bit slower to react in the traction control systems with that auto-locking rear diff, which is not as quick and easy as the set locker in the 79. The remote red shocks are really firm on this car, but they handle the bumps very well as well. Pounding across them at speed earlier on, you wouldn't even know they're there. To just spending a week out at the Fink Desert Race, and I jumped behind the wheel of this, couldn't help but think I was in a trophy truck with that bellowing V8, that good suspension and that big long bonnet out the front. Big American trucks, there's nothing like them. They're really made for big country, long distance driving and well suited to Australia. An option worth looking at, and once again Rambler's got you covered for whatever you need. G'day folks, we had a few days out here in sunny Queensland playing with some of the fantastic vehicles from Rambler and ASG. But we thought, where do these cars come from? Who builds them? Who puts them together? So we've got Chris Humphries here, head of Rambler Vehicles. Chris, how are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. How'd you find the vehicles?
Mate, fantastic. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah,
really
great.
good. We've seen plenty of these cars in the magazines, but it's good to spend some time behind the wheel and see what makes them so good.
Yep.
Mate, tell me, where did Rambler Vehicles come from?
So Rambler came out of an idea, going back about 4 or 5 years ago. We saw a space in the market. There were some other players that were building vehicles that had fixed menus, so there was no ability to customise them. And then, through our accessory shops, we saw people doing little bits and pieces, and we saw, that we could do it better. So we purchased a vehicle, built the whole thing, and put it up for sale. Sold in, I think, about 36 minutes from memory.
Yeah, wow.
And the rest is kind of history. The business is growing out of there into what it is today, and I liken it to a turnkey house and land package. Yep. It's the same deal. We can find you the car, work to what you need and what you want on the vehicle, what you want to do with it, your budget, and then build the whole thing together and hand it over. What we pride ourselves on is actually being able to understand the customer needs. So we ask the right questions and try and understand what they want to do, where they want to go, and give them the best advice.
So taking the three vehicles we've got behind us here now, very different vehicles,
yes,
all built with a similar purpose in mind.
Yep.
Is that indicative of the customer's wants and needs?
These three vehicles are a really good example of, I guess, the greater market. All three vehicles have similar purpose, but they're very different. All of them are touring vehicles, but your 79 is more off-road based, harder tracks, getting to the more remote places. The Chevy and the 300 are good touring platforms that will get off-road and get you to the places lesser seen.
So you've got some key suppliers you work with. Tell me about them.
There's obviously some preferred partners that we work with. The big thing with Rambler is we will build it your way. Yep. ASG, as you know, we're announcing that we're merging with them to form a larger automotive group. And the reason for that is what they do really complements what we do. ASG, particularly for us doing the dual cab conversions, the vehicle feels like an OE finish when we get it. Superior is another key supplier that we work with. Again, very specialised in what they do, and they're market leaders in that, the coil conversion kits on the 79s. And then on the Silverado, we've teamed up with Touring Solutions Australia and worked with them to develop the GVM and the GCM upgrade on that vehicle. So the one behind us, it's the first one in Australia that's been complied with the new 4499 GVM and the 899 combined mass capacity. There are a lot of key suppliers that go into this, and quality is at the heart of what we do. A lot of our vehicles end up with light force on them, another quality Australian product, a lot of TJM gear because of the quality.
Now, on most of the vehicles we see from you, and certainly all three vehicles here, got canopies on them.
Yes, yes. So Spinifex Manufacturing is actually our brand as well. And you know, the same ethos applies today as it did back in the mining days, where lightweight, strong, practical.
Now, a lot of these builds, there's a fair bit of engineering involved, and you offer second stage manufacturing, that sort of licensing, because the car has to be approved.
Yes, so all of our Rambler vehicles, we ensure they're road legal. So working with SSM approvals, so on the ASG side of the business, dual cab conversions and the GVM upgrades are all SSM approved. Superior suspension systems, SSM approved. The Silverado GVM GCMs are all SSM approved. We also do the engineering for state-based things like the automatic transmission conversion in the 79.
And what about, you mentioned some people may have already got their own vehicle. If that vehicle's already on the road and they want to bring it in for a total transformation, something you can do?
Yeah, look, it certainly is. There are some restrictions, particularly in Queensland, but we work with that. So we would work through the process and advise what we can and can't do. And again, you know, we're very focused on providing a product that is road registered, safe, legal, and we'll back the vehicle and we stand behind it. So the whole experience isn't over when you take delivery of the car.
That's great, that's fantastic. It's just like buying a new car, as you say, or a new house.
Yes, yes, 100%.
And I'd certainly be happy to drive one of these around the country, like for 365 days as well. They're just fantastic builds. We've had a small taste of it here over the last couple of days. Real pleasure to drive the cars, and yeah, thanks for your time.
No worries, mate. Thank you very much. Now we're going to have to get those keys back off you.
Yeah, I don't know about that. When people look at this vehicle behind me, we often see them do a double take. They can't quite figure out what it is. Is it a Hilux? No, it's bigger than a Hilux. Is it a Chop 200 series? Oh, wait a minute, no, it's a bit different again. Wait on, this is a 300 series double cab ute. Toyota don't make that. No, there's really a lot of work goes into creating a vehicle like this, and the company behind it is ASG 4x4.
The 300 is a great platform to begin with. And I know the team at ASG, it was a huge step to convert this. There's a lot that went into the actual process before even a grinder got put to the car. You know, ASG were 12, 18 months worth of engineering before they actually created the first vehicle. And it is a credit to ASG in the work that they've done on it. Once
they've done all their computer design and sketching out what they want to do, where do they start then?
Look, there's no pretty way to describe this part of the process. Basically, it's strip the thing apart and cut the back off. You remove the whole interior, right back to the dashboard. They then take the doors off and the glass out of the back section of the car, and then a big grinder goes through it.
It's a nasty process when you think someone's just forked out $120,000, $130,000 on a brand new Land Cruiser,
yes,
and you go to it with a grinder.
That's, I guess, where you start from. And then what you see behind us is the finished process, and there's a lot in between that. So once they've cut the back off it, the chassis gets extended. There are a few that are done in the standard wheelbase, but the majority get extended into what we call a midi, a long or a super long wheelbase, and then the cab reconstruction occurs. So part of that is a whole new back wall, bonded window in the back, and then all the interior work around it to finish it off. It sounds simple when you say it, but it's very, very involved to get a quality of finish like this one here. And you know, ASG present that vehicle and it looks like it rolled off Toyota's production line as a dual cab. And as you said before, we know that didn't happen.
Yeah. Did it pose more problems to get all those safety systems into this car?
Look, the technology is always a challenge. So this vehicle behind us, all the train control, as you've experienced over the last couple of days, still works. The ABS and traction control systems, lane departure, blind spot monitoring, park sensors, reverse cameras, all of that still has to work. Having those challenges, and the more advanced the vehicle gets, you know, I guess the more confidence you've got that someone like ASG are doing a quality job because they can handle all of those, I guess, extra technologies in the vehicle.
Okay. And with lengthening the chassis, you're moving the rear suspension components backwards.
Yes.
And yes, you use aftermarket springs and shocks and so forth, but the suspension design and everything is factory, isn't it?
Yes, yes. So there's no modification to how the suspension works, the suspension geometry. We're simply changing the wheelbase. Now, when you change the wheelbase, we actually change how the vehicle handles to an extent. We improve it. So from a towing point of view, from a load carrying point of view, it's better because you're actually getting the weight further forward. It's a completely different car to drive, and in my opinion, I think it's a better car to drive than the wagon.
Yeah, I certainly found driving this car both on the road, off-road, and with a caravan on the back, it's a more stable platform. You've got a longer wheelbase that keeps it more stable and more comfortable, rides over the bumps better. What makes them change between, you've got the 3 different lengths there, why do people choose one or the other?
It really depends upon need. The longer wheelbases generally come back to load carrying, so looking for the larger tray space. The mid wheelbase that ASG do is very, very popular because it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get that improvement in towing, you get a tray on the back that's usable. So it comes back to what the customer wants to do, and it's that understanding of what the customer's needs are.
And when someone's getting a vehicle out of ASG, whatever length they want, it's all approved, it's registerable.
If you bring a vehicle pre-registration to ASG, it'll be second stage manufactured. So silver plate, federally approved, registerable in any state in Australia. Selectable GVM of 4200 or 4499, depending upon setup.
So obviously a very talented bunch here at ASG.
Yes.
What other sort of services do they do? Is it just creating double cab utes?
No, so look, that's probably the most popular service, but another significant part is chassis extensions. So on 79 series, Hilux, Rangers, basically any dual cab ute, they can extend the chassis, so anywhere from 300 to 600 mil, depending upon needs. And the reasoning for those extensions is exactly the same why the wheelbase gets extended on the 300. Load carrying, getting the weight forward, better ride, better towing.
They should have called it ASG vehicle improvements, because that's what you're doing. You're improving what is generally a good product to start with and make it better.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, if they drive out the way these things are, I'd be happy too. The big thing for a lot of people building a large outback touring four-wheel drive is its towing ability. So we're back in the 300 series now, and we've hooked up a 20-foot Lotus caravan behind us, which weighs in at about 3.5 tonne. So it's right on the towing capacity of the standard 300 series. Straight away, yeah, you feel the engine working a bit harder, but it's not struggling at all. It's got plenty of torque, really grunts along nicely. The engine sound is, well, I won't say it's a lovely sound, it's not a V8 or anything like that, but it's not offensive as some V6s can be. You don't complain about it at all. Gets a bit of a harsh growl when you're under heavy load, but then it quietens down after that. Also, you've got to think that this car's got an aftermarket exhaust system on it as well, plus a bit of a tune. But yeah, it gets along really well. Put your foot down, transmission kicks down, gets up and goes quite well. Actually gets along in boogies. Yeah, transmission's smooth as, no complaints there. You've got a couple of modes you can switch to here between sport and eco modes. We've tried both. I think it's a bit more aggressive in the sport mode, and it does change back a bit sooner, which is probably what you want with the caravan. Easy to use manual in this transmission. You just pull the gear lever across toward your leg and you tip it back and forth as you need to. A really nice stable platform here with, this has got a 650mm chassis extension, the TJM XJS suspension. It's really stable, doesn't give anything to complain about. It's interesting to compare this with the Chevy, which, even though it's a standard suspension length, it's a big chassis to start with, so it'll be interesting to have a look at that and see how they go. But as we've sort of been predicting so far with this, we reckon this 300 might be the middle ground between the Chevy and the 79 series. It's a good all-rounder. It's certainly making easy work of towing this rather heavy caravan. The feel of driving this thing on the road as well. It's nice thick leather steering wheel, typical Toyota fit and finish inside, always really nice. Even though this car's a base model, it's still nice finish on the door trims and across the dash top. not the leather you get in the higher grades, but it's a leather look with some faux stitching on there. Feel like you could tow, 10 hours a day out on the highway with this thing. It's just so relaxed and easy. I reckon this thing steers exactly the same as it does with or without the van on. The feel on the front end is just like a standard car, no dramas at all. It's very car-like almost. It's an easy car to drive. Put your foot down, steer, brake, whatever you want to do. I reckon it's going to be almost the best sorted out of these vehicles for towing. Well, let's get back to the farm, switch it over to the next car and see what it's like. We're in the Silverado now with the caravan on the back, and you hear that big V8 working a little bit harder. But it does a really fine job of pulling this quite heavy van. Yeah, as I say, you feel this engine work a bit harder, and being a petrol and not a diesel has a different sort of torque curve to those Toyotas, but the big 6.2 litre V8 is not lacking in torque either. So it gets along really nice. The transmission works really well. We've selected the trailer towing mode in the modes on the dash here, and it works really well. It cuts back in a gear when you need to, slowing down. You can go manual on the shifter as well. The suspension, you feel a bit of a wobble over the bumps. We're on some pretty bouncy, rough old back roads here, but the shocks do a fantastic job of controlling it. You get that first little undulation and bump, and the shocks just really balance it out nicely. And if you're prepared to put your foot down, the thing gets up and cruises beautifully. We're out on the open highway a few minutes ago, sits on 100, 110 easily, cruises along. As we said before, these things are a great towing vehicle for people that really need to be hauling those 4,500 kilos, which you can't do with the two Toyotas. And with all that space in the back seat and in the cabin here, it's the only one for towing with a family. It's a real perfect vehicle for that sort of stuff. You want to go any bigger than this, you're going to be going with a heavy duty Chevy 2500 or a Ram 2500 or something like that. Get the really big diesel towing experience, but for the price of these things compared to the big 2500s, this is a great alternative. So if you can't tell by the sound, we're in the 79 series V8 Land Cruiser. It certainly makes a bit bellowing noise. It does sound a bit different because it's got this 6-speed automatic transmission behind it, which it really works well for a vehicle that's towing. Doesn't want for any power, it really gets up and goes. The torque converter is quite loose in it when you put your foot down, so it uses the revs, gets it up there in its torque band, gets going quite well. But I gotta say, first thing about this car is it's not set up for towing. It doesn't have airbags in the back or anything like that. That didn't even have an electronic brake controller in it. So we put a Bluetooth controller in here, got the brakes working, and we're out on the road with the big van on the back, 3.5 ton. Like any 70 series, you really got to keep your wits about you when you're driving on an uneven and bumpy road with this car. It wallows about a bit. We thought it would have been quite bad, but no, it's not as bad as we thought. It gets along all right. Plenty of power, the transmission works well. One thing about the transmission though is that it doesn't always shift back when you want to. You pull it across to toward your knee for manual actuation and pull it back, but it doesn't go back as soon as you'd like to, like the 300 does. I definitely wouldn't want to be having this exhaust system on the car if I was going to be towing around Australia with this caravan on the back. It's just always on the song, yeah, and always loud and noisy. It's yeah, sounds good for a little while, but I reckon I'd tire of it pretty quick. It would be interesting to drive this vehicle if it did have some airbags in it to control the rear end a bit more. Sure, this superior coil system works great for when you're driving off-road. It articulates really well and really nice. It's very supple, just less than ideal with this heavy load on the back. We said earlier on that the strength of this 79 is its off-road ability. So yeah, that's where its high point is. It's probably not the best tow vehicle out of this trio. That's been an interesting comparison. We'll tally up our thoughts and we'll pick a winner of the three. We've had a great few days up here driving some amazing vehicles. Like seriously, these are some of the best touring four-wheel drives money can buy. But which one would be right for you? Which one would you really want out of these three cars? They are actually very different vehicles made for doing the same purpose. Each one has its strengths, so it's very hard to pick a winner out of them. For me personally, I like the 70 series, but I've got a soft spot for them. But, and there is always a but, the Chevy Silverado, what a beast. That thing just feels like a monster. Every time you get in it, you want to put your foot down, hear that V8 engine bellow. Inside, it's got so much space. The suspension is superb. Those shock absorbers really control all that mass. Keep that thing polished on the road. You wouldn't believe it's an American pickup truck. The old days of having big, fat, uncontrolled pickup trucks out the window. This thing is a superb touring vehicle. The LC300, probably the best touring vehicle out of these. It is an all-rounder. It does everything well. Up the gnarly hills, it climbed them just as easy as the other ones. Probably easier and certainly smoother. Comfortable inside, even without so many mods in there compared to the other two. It's got a big Toyota screen. The seats have been trimmed up nicely. It's a fantastic vehicle. Plenty of room in the back seat. But then there's the 70 series. It's tall, it's narrow, it's cramped inside, noisy, but I still love it. There was the towing section, 3.5 tonne on the back of these cars. It's a lot of weight, and they all handled it pretty well. Sure, the 70 series isn't really set up for towing, but it did a commendable job. Wasn't as bad as we thought it would be, actually. The Chevy, once again, a fantastic job. Went smoothly, got along really well, but it didn't do as good a job as the 300 series. That was just superb. It is made for it, that long wheelbase, the V6 engine, smooth, quiet, refined. It is just the best touring vehicle. And if you want to choose a vehicle you're going to drive around Australia, towing a big van, that's the one you want.